Paul Mitchell, I believe, I don't know where he was before Southampton, or if he was anywhere before Southampton, but he basically started out as a scout, right?
Yeah.
At Southampton, made that transition, moved to Spurs, and then from Spurs he worked for the Red Bull organization.
Exactly, yeah. Leipzig,
and then
etc.
from there he moved to Monaco.
Yeah.
Where under him he had Lawrence Stewart, who's now at Chelsea.
That's right.
And then he left Monaco a year ago, something like that? Or towards the end of last season.
Yeah, in the summer, at the end of last season.
But he announced he was leaving.
Yeah, a bit before, yeah.
So, what are his qualities from what you saw at Monaco?
He clearly has a very good eye for talent, for young talent especially. Also because I think in some cases it's the hardest way. If you're Manchester United and you sign big stars, big players, a lot of us can identify, top players in the top positions. I think he's
Erling Haaland is a pretty good centre forward.
Yeah, exactly. Or Kylian Mbappe could be good for your team. That kind of stuff. So I think he's a very smart guy. He works really, really hard. He spends a lot of time watching players, analysing data, working with his team around him to make good signings, not overpriced signings, things like that. He's made mistakes before. There's been signings that happened in all those clubs that didn't work out for whatever reason. But I think considering or compared to what United have had before, not have before as a sporting director or director of football, whatever one you want to call it, I think he's a huge, huge improvement.
So looking at this, if I'm trying to think of the negatives, and I think there's very few negatives with Paul Mitchell in terms of his rep and whatever, but the potential, the potential questions I would be asking if I were Manchester United before I hire Paul Mitchell. One is, when the biggest club he's been at before was Spurs, right?
Yeah.
That didn't work out.
No.
My understanding is it didn't work out in part because of the relationship with the manager.
Yeah, and the structure.
And that was a manager who he worked with before at Southampton.
Yeah.
And this is the man who's now the manager of Chelsea, Mauricio Pochettino.
Yeah.
So I'd want to definitely know more about that, about what happened. Was it Daniel Levy poking in, saying no to everything and being the Grinch?
Or was it Pochettino who wanted to be the sporting director as well as the manager?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. Yes. My understanding, based on conversations also with somebody else who was there, who was the sporting director before, that is kind of the Pochettino MO once he establishes credibility. Look, and let's not forget, at the time, Pochettino had achieved tremendous things with Spurs. So he had all the credit. He was being linked to Real Madrid, Manchester United, whatever, right? My other concern might be, you mentioned young players, identifying talent, and so on. If you're Manchester United, yes, obviously that's very important, but it's not like you're going to go on a 5-year rebuilding job through youth, right? You're going to have to also go and acquire ready-made players at the peak of their career, right?
Yeah,
like the Casemiro signing, or Varane. You need to have that blend.
Yeah.
That's not something he's really done before.
No, because at Leipzig, even at Spurs, you don't attract the same, as you mentioned, Gab, rightly so, you don't attract the same players at Manchester United. You don't have the same budget either. Leipzig can't spend 80 million on 3-4 players in your current squad like United can. So I think with that and with the ambition of the club, at Leipzig, he knew exactly what he was asked for. At Monaco, very
scenario.
similar too. Real
Madrid signs Mbappe. Yeah, you like this, yeah? So Vinicius says, all right, screw this. I know I signed a contract. I want to leave. I don't like Xabi Alonso. Whoever takes over, he smells, whatever, right? Yeah. And then you have a decision. So Real Madrid put Vinicius on the market. This is all hypothetical, by the way.
Yeah,
please don't clip this.
Don't go mad at Gab.
You have to then put a value on how much you're willing to spend with Vinicius. You're going to have to, how much you want to pay Vinicius and so on. This is a skill set which Paul Mitchell hasn't had to deal with yet. Right, so this is the unknown.
On another scale.
But never on a scale for such a.
Yeah, but it's the same for a £10 million player. If the other club won 20, you value him at 10. It's the same as 200 and 100 million.
The difference is that if it's a £10 million player, you don't have, and it's Leipzig or Monaco. Let's face it, Monaco have about 10 fans. Leipzig, nobody likes them. So you're in a situation.
You still don't want to get your transfers wrong.
No, that's fine. But anything like this that plays out, say this hypothetical Vinicius,
Yeah.
Real Madrid, Manchester United, you have the two biggest brands in the world. You have Brazil, the biggest brand in international football.
Yeah.
You have Vinicius.
Yeah.
Everything gets played out in the glare of the spotlight. It is a big step up.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, and look, I'm not being negative about it, but again, if I were interviewing Paul Mitchell, I would say, how would you deal with this? How do you see this, right? I think these are the unknowns, which is fine. You always have that. And if you don't give him a chance, you'll never find out. So I'm certainly not being critical of it.
No.
But that would be the big step up, right?
Yeah, it would. But I think that he's got a huge network and he knows a lot of people in the game. He's usually, I think, quite wise in what he does. And again, I agree with you where he's never signed a £100 million player yet. In his whole career, I'd be very surprised. But on the back of my head, I don't
Most
think
expensive with Golovin?
Maybe, yeah.
That worked out great, didn't it?
But I think Golovin was even there before Mitchell
okay.
arrived. So we need to look it up. But it would not be 100 million anyway. However, I also think that he's got the personality and that the kind of man management is wrong for sports director, but he's quite a charmer. He talks really well. He could convince you of a good project. Not that he probably needs to convince Vinicius if Vinicius wants to come to United, but I think he could put that all together very, very nicely.
Okay, so we talk about him as a head of recruitment, and I don't want to get stuck on titles, but they do become relevant. We're talking about as a sporting director, we mean the guy who does contracts, who buys and sells players, who's kind of the go-between between the club and the first team coach, right? United, for the first time in their history, appointed somebody to that role, I think, 18 months ago. And that man is John Murtough.
Who didn't really have the pedigree to get that title, right? We agree
I think he didn't have the pedigree, he didn't have the track record. I think also he probably suffered from the fact that this was an internal promotion and they create a new position. So it's not like Murtough could go into the job and be like, oh, the guy before me had authority over this, that, and that. No, he was in a situation where he was defining the role. I think when you get promoted internally in any organization,
isn't that better even because you can shape it the way you want because you're the first one.
But you go from working for the manager to then being the manager's boss. I think that's effectively the thing. And unless you have somebody powerful behind you, like the CEO, but then the CEO was Ed Woodward, who was on his way out at the time. I think it's difficult, even if you want to, even if he has the skill set, to go to Van Gaal and say, no, Van Gaal, this is Wout Weghorst, this is stupid. Or Anthony, no, not a penny more than 50 million. Or whatever, whatever he's going to do, right? He doesn't necessarily have the internal authority, especially the club, where the kind of institutional memory of the club culture is, no, the gaffer's in charge, because that's the way it was under Sir Alex, right? So I think all these things made his job harder.
Yeah.
I don't think it's I think his title is football director. And all these briefings that they brief with Paul Mitchell coming as sporting director, we agree these are just titles. You can call him director of football, call him general manager. We assume Paul Mitchell, if he comes in, it's either going to be Paul Mitchell or Paul Mitchell, whoever they bring in, is going to be the boss there. And Murtough will either work under him or seek employment elsewhere.
I think John Murtough will either do something else or leave the club. And rightly so. He should not be staying, certainly not with that title. There's no, he didn't do a good job as director of football or whatever the title he had. Let's be honest here.
Football director.
I'm sure, football director. I'm sure he's a nice guy. We know a lot of people who know him well, who work with him,
who worked before.
Speak. So I'm sure.
But it's down to what you're empowered to do.
Yeah, maybe. But he still hasn't done a good job. I'm really sorry.
The other names that are being mentioned in connection with the club, and I'm sure there'll be some sort of commercial director, but we were not going to bore you because unless you're a sponsorship nerd, you're not going to care.
Yeah.
Are two guys that obviously have strong links with Ratcliffe. One is Dave Brailsford.
Yeah.
This is a cycling thing, so this might be more up your alley than mine.
No, he does all the sports now because he came at Nice, which is the other club, one of the other clubs owned by Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And Brailsford was heavily involved, not always in a nice way, in the last 18 months or so at Nice doing a big audit.
Okay, for those who don't follow
things.
cycling, can you tell us how Dave Brailsford became famous? What he became famous for?
He kind of revolutionized in a way, like road cycling certainly here in England by creating the Sky team that became really, really successful, popular, won Tour de France, where he was this big brain behind it. behind them being so good, focusing especially on the marginal gains. So anything that can help you, even what looks like a tiny thing.
The pillows, the hand sanitizer, whatever.
Everything, the way you sleep, the way you eat, all of that, he thought highly of. And then when he got into the Ineos family, if you want.
I think there were some questions also about what happened with Sky, which I'm going to refer you to Google on as well. No, because it is part of the story. I'm not, I'll just leave it at that. But it is cycling, so bear that in mind.
Yeah, but then he got into the Ineos family, which is this like sporting kind of empire that Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been building. So they've got Formula One, they've got sailing, they've got rugby.
The Ineos Formula One team. What are you talking about, Formula One?
They are a big partner in one of the Formula One teams. What are you talking about? Which one? McLaren, I think. Right. They're everywhere.
So not the one that wins. Okay,
they're heavily involved in Formula One and in sailing and in rugby and in loads of sports, including football. They own a few football clubs. Mercedes, not McLaren, Mercedes for Formula One. So they're big. They're big in all the sport. And Dave Brailsford is involved. He's kind of one of the big heads of all of that. So he's involved in anything that he wants to be, like Nice.
Is he a potential CEO? Probably not, right?
No, but he would be...
He's a guy who can help, advise.
He would be heavily involved. Right. I think he would be like a consultant at Manchester United, because that's what he wants as well. Remember Sir Clive Woodward, after he won the Rugby World Cup with England?
Going to Southampton.
Everybody wanted his view, his expertise, even in sports I didn't know. Sir Dave is the same.
And then there's Jean-Claude Blanc. We've mentioned him before.
Yeah,
he's the guy who, if you remember the Calciopoli scandal, this is the first time I first met him or knew of him, was after the Calciopoli scandal in 2006. Juventus got relegated. The owner says, "Oh my God, all these people are toxic who've been involved with the club. Let's bring in somebody from the outside who's got nothing to do with Juve." And so they brought in a CEO. Sant'Albano, who was but nothing to do with football. Maybe he was a football fan, I don't know. And they brought in Jean-Claude Blanc.
Yeah. Well, Blanc was the CEO and Sant'Albano the president?
He's one or the other.
Something like that, yeah.
But then, since then, he's had some big jobs in French football.
Yeah, he went to PSG, did really well there. I think he did a good job at Juve to clean things up and certainly put the club on.
Not so much on the pitch, but that was beyond their control.
Yeah. He's not a football. I mean, he loves football, but he's not a football guy himself, right? You won't see him involved heavily in transfers, in recruitment, in first team football. He's not De Laurentiis. He would not come down onto the pitch.
He's not going to tell Ten Hag that Marcus Rashford, let's play him on the right.
Exactly. That's not him. However, he's very good with numbers. He's a very smart guy. He knows all the economics, all the way, the structures, everything.
So we're thinking potential CEO.
For me, yeah, he would be a great CEO. I said before, I think I even put it on social media, that if Sir Jim brings Blanc and Mitchell at United, this would be the best move they've done in a very, very long time.
Okay, in Sir Jim himself, because I look at this, and obviously Nice are doing really well this season because they finally appointed an Italian manager. Yeah. But it's not like they were pulling up trees beforehand, right? Is that just part of the learning process where you've got Sir Jim and his money and Brailsford and Blanc, all these smart people, but, ultimately you will make mistakes and there will be growing pains? Yeah,
so I think he made it. So the first mistake I think he made was to say that in the 3 years after he took over, which was a bit more than 4 years ago now, they would compete for the title against PSG. So we would be as good as PSG, good enough to compete with them for the title, right? First mistake, don't promise things like that.
Okay, so you delivered in year 4 rather than year 3.
Yeah, they're not going to compete, I think, with PSG.
Are they competing for the title now?
You don't play the title after 12 games, you agree, right? Thank you very much. The second one, maybe that he put his brother Bob, who I think knows even less about football than Jim himself, as the CEO at Nice, which didn't really work out, and that's why he only lasted 18 months. But the results are not, I mean, it depends what you call good or not good, but 5th, they finished twice 5th, and then 8th and 9th, I think, in the 4 years that they've been in charge. So it's not dramatic. It could have been better, of course, it could have been better, but there's still some European qualifications there. They lost a cup final that
obviously
you
expect much better results at Manchester United.
Yeah, but
5th, 8th, and twice 9th isn't going to...
No, but that's it goes with the club that you have in the league that you are in. So the ambitions for United are going to be bigger. They spend decent money around the 200 million euro mark. They bought Young first, which I thought was quite clever, although Mino Raiola was heavily involved in that recruitment. And then they appointed Ian Moody, remember him?
Yes.
Yes, unfortunately, as the kind of sporting director in a way.
This is Cardiff's Ian Moody.
Yeah, exactly, of Crystal Palace. And he went and got Schmeichel, Kasper Schmeichel,
Ross
Aaron
Barkley,
Ramsey, Ross Barkley, yeah, those kind of guys. So clearly two different periods in those 4 years. The second one maybe not as great as the first one.
All right, final point on Sir Jim, because there's been rumors, and we were talking about this before
Stories,
the show,
yeah,
about one of his brainwaves is Jadon Sancho. And whereby he said basically, hey, or the thinking is he wants Ten Hag to get Sancho off the naughty
make
step.
peace.
Make peace. I mean, the way I see it is I look at this and say, you're a club asset. You cost a ton of money.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about possible loan moves later, but
you need to
it
protect
makes
the value.
sense. You have to, yeah. I mean, the only reason, now at the same time, if Ten Hag comes back and say, listen, Sancho is so toxic and so unpleasant that he makes the rest of the team worse, and I have to put the team ahead of Sancho, and that's why I can't even have him training with us. And Ten Hag tells you that, then it's Ten Hag, then fair enough.
Yeah,
right?
because so this story is in many newspapers in England, which usually shows you that it's been
the PR people
exactly
on the phone.
Which is fair with us. We know how it works. It will happen again many times. Do you have an issue though with Sir Jim arriving at the club and already telling Ten Hag what Ten Hag has to do or what he wants Ten Hag to do? So you're Ten Hag, I'm Sir Jim, I'm coming in and say, listen, I don't like this Sancho training on his own, no contact with the first team, not even in the dressing room. This is not right. Go and make peace with him. Is it right for Sir Jim to arrive and be in the building 1 minute and tell Ten Hag what he has to do?
So I don't know that he's told him that he has to do this. I think if he goes and he asks Ten Hag and says, hey, what's the deal with Sancho? Because he is a club asset. Can you explain to me your thinking what your thinking is? Because look, I'm sure Ten Hag would rather have a fit and productive Sancho contributing to the first team, right? I mean, he wants that.
Yeah.
If Sancho's not there, I'm assuming that Ten Hag hasn't bumped his head and gone insane. Ten Hag is doing this because he believes, rightly or wrongly, that having Sancho around is bad for United's first team. And that's what he has to look at. That's what he's got to put first. It's as simple as that. So if he can convince Jim of that, then fair enough. If Jim trusts his decision-making process there, I got no issue with it.